good game. I'm Hex.
And I'm Bajo. Hey Hex, you know what this means?
I know exactly what that means. You've been loot collecting in the new Diablo III expansion, Reaper of Souls.
Brother. Why?
We also take to the pixelated skies in Luftrausers.
And we look at some otherworldly architecture in the walk-em-up NaissanceE.
I'll get my art face ready, Hex.
What's your art face? Oh. Plus, we catch up with the creators of games like Dear Esther and Gone Home to discuss the future of game narratives. But first, can you name the game for this week?
All right, Hex, are you ready to fly the unfriendly skies?
Am I? Yes.
Yeah, okay. Luftrausers is pure retro brutality. It looks like a twin-stick shooter, but the controls hark back to an even simpler time. You just steer left and right while regularly pumping the gas and guns, fighting against gravity in a sky that's teeming with enemies and bullet fire. You will die a lot.
Yes, this is a tough game, but the more you play, the more you feel like you're becoming a better pilot. Frantically spinning around and shooting at a bunch of planes on your tail is always satisfying. It gives you that feeling that the designers were balancing and polishing everything until it felt just right.
Yeah, absolutely. This game is by Vlambeer, the same team behind last year's Ridiculous Fishing. And just like that game, they've taken a simple concept and just injected pure fun into it. I think the way health works is a perfect example. The only way you can repair your plane is to stop shooting. But the scoring system is completely based around your enemy kill multiplier. So you're constantly juggling priorities between your score multiplier and your plane's health.
Yeah, I found it pretty tough to keep that multiplier up consistently. The standard enemy planes are easy multiplier fodder, but I pretty much had to put my score on hold when I was tackling the gunships. They soak up so much damage, and straying into their line of fire is pretty much a guaranteed death sentence.
Yeah, it took quite a few attempts before I was able to actually sink one. My go-to strategy is what I call the stalling angel. I like to fly high above the enemies and then cut the engines. Then as I drop down, spin and hammer away with the guns with a pull-up at just the last second. I quite enjoyed working out little routines like this.
Yeah, there's a hidden depth to this game, isn't there? Plus, I like the way you can dip your plane underwater briefly without it meaning instant death. Sometimes you'll need to do this to get away from a hail of gunfire. But I also like diving underneath the smaller ships and exploding up through them. Surprise!
There's a big mix of custom planes you can build by mixing and matching a whole lot of weapons, bodies and engines, and that's great. I had some fun with this flying tank. Tricked out with the fastest engine and a massive gun. Of course, the downside is it also handles like a tank.
I was a fan of the hovering engine. It gives your plane zero-G controls. It reminded me a lot of the space combat in Battlestar Galactica.
Getting a chance to relive your Starbuck fantasies, Hex?
Wherever I can, Bajo. Although not even she could help me with those stupid blimps.
Yeah, they're pretty much always surrounded by a wall of bullets. I gave up and switched to a kamikaze plane that sets off a nuke when you die. Result! What are you giving it, Hex?
Well, I think Luftrausers does a pretty good job of shoehorning fun, acrobatic combat into a retro shell. I had a really good time with this. I'm giving it 8.
We played this on PC and I think it is more suited for the handheld Vita version, but yeah, this is great fun. I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10. And now to the news with Goose.
Thanks, guys. A writer and director have been named for the upcoming Splinter Cell film. Oscar-nominated writer Sheldon Turner, whose credits include Up in the Air and X-Men First Class, has been hired to write the script, while the director of The Bourne Identity and Edge of Tomorrow, Doug Liman, will take the director's chair. Actor Tom Hardy has signed up to play Sam Fisher, with production set to begin in August. As expected, April the 1st last week brought us the usual slew of gaming hoaxes. Highlights from this year included Google turning their Maps app into a worldwide Pokemon hunt. The app featured 150 Pokemon to find and catch, while those who could catch them all would then compete at the end of the year to get the job of Pokemon Master at Google. Blizzard also announced Blizzard Outcasts, a retro fighting game starring a ragtag cast of characters, including the Battle Cruiser, Treasure Goblin, and the Dirt Devil. It would have also been released along with a limited edition fight stick featuring ergonomic design, 32 buttons, and a built-in credit card machine. And finally, Microsoft has announced their new head of their Xbox division, Phil Spencer. Spencer has spent 25 years at Microsoft and was previously in charge of Microsoft Game Studios, fostering key franchises such as Halo, Gears of War, and Forza.
Thanks, Goose. All right, Bajo, time for our next review. NaissanceE is an exploratory first-person game.
Hang on a sec, Hex. Exploratory first-person game? French title? Oh no.
Wait, Bajo, what's happening?
Oh, it's the French auntie! Walk 'em up, Hex!
Oh,
No! This is NaissanceE, a first-person puzzle exploration platformer kind of thing, which reminds me a bit of Portal, just a lot stranger.
You play as Lucy, a silent protagonist who we first see running from a mysterious cube creature. No, thank you.
Pretty good.
Then, after tumbling down a hole, she finds herself lost in some immense and elaborate construct.
There's no narration, no audio logs, and no other living soul to tell you anything about this place. All you know comes from what you see. What you can see tells a very strange story indeed.
Yeah, it's quite a sight. The designs of rooms and structures range from chaotic jumbles of cubes, surgically clean and minimalist, sprawling underground metropolises, eventually delving into some of the most intensely surreal virtual places I've ever seen.
Yeah, it gives you a great sense of mystery that I think leaves you asking questions and coming up with little theories.
Is this an alien planet, or perhaps a scientific experiment?
How did I get here?
Where is everyone?
Was there an apocalypse?
Maybe this was all built for me and it's simply that creature's impression of my reality.
I do like how open to interpretation it all is.
Yeah, it's kind of like going through room after room of beautiful virtual art exhibits. And just like any good artwork, each exhibit invites that kind of artsy discussion about a greater meaning and purpose. Although I'm not sure there always is a greater meaning, but at least it makes you think.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to review this without sounding like we're reviewing a painting.
I loved the stark, almost unfinished look they've employed. Surfaces are clean with no real colour or texture to them.
Yeah, the use of colour, or the lack of it, is quite striking, isn't it? The world isn't necessarily black and white, but there's almost no colour for the light to show.
Yeah, it's some of the most eye-catching use of light and shadow that I've ever seen. While often it's just pretty, it's also used to great effect to play some masterful mind games on you. It can be quite disorienting, but just as you'll start to feel completely lost, a door will suddenly appear or you'll see a hint of light to guide you.
Although I could have done without these bloody doors. You find these two doors, one leads to a pure white room and the other to a pure black one, and the only way to navigate is from fast flashes of light or shadow, and you can fall off platforms to your death. Worst rooms ever, Hex.
Yeah, they were kind of like extreme versions of, do you remember that game Unfinished Swan? Although thankfully things aren't always that intense.
Yes, and I was glad that this wasn't a pure walk-em-up. There are a few puzzles where you'll have to move lights around to make walls and platforms disappear or move. There's not many of them, and none of them have any particularly tricky or mind-bending solutions, but I'm glad they're there.
And there's also quite a bit of tricky platforming, which helped keep it from becoming too much of a passive experience.
Some of the heavy platforming sections do lead to some pretty cheap deaths though.
Yeah, but the checkpoints are generous, and I think that stops it from becoming too frustrating. Speaking of frustrating, I'm not sure if I found some bugs or if the game just deliberately traps you in certain places, but I stumbled across what seemed to be a child's room, and then all of a sudden I could barely move, and then when I tried to leave, a strange force would just throw me back in.
Yeah, at one point I got trapped in an infinite stairwell with no way out. I spent ages running down them thinking something was about to happen or there was some puzzle to solve. But no, just infinite stairs.
Well, that one got me too.
Oh fuck.
The only solution I found in both cases was reloading the last checkpoint and going in a different direction, so I get the feeling like those were intentional trolls. It's kind of annoying for sure, but you know, looking back at it, I kind of like that those things are just there to mess with you, and I'm sure there's some other little hidden secrets to be discovered as well.
Yeah, I think as an interactive piece of art, this is quite spectacular, but it's also not particularly fun, and in fact I found it quite annoying at times. I also think maybe it's a little overpriced for the 2 or 3 hours you get out of this game.
Well, your running time will depend on how long you get stuck in infinite stairways in children's rooms.
This is true. I think if you're looking for something to simulate a psychedelic night at the Modern Art Museum, then this is right up your alley. I'm giving it 6.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Now, the last hour of this game really blew me away because things get a lot more strange and a lot more surreal. Sadly though, I think the actual ending was pretty weak. But, you know, it is a visually impressive game with a stunning soundtrack to boot and just, you know, really interesting. So I'm giving it 8.
NaissanceE is a perfect example of a game that tells a story in a unique way, and recently we spoke to some developers at the Perth Writers Festival about that very subject.
We've seen a lot of really incredible stories being told in games. When you look at what they're doing with representing characters and doing performance capture in The Last of Us, you know, it allows them to present that story in a way that you never could have before.
Riley, you're such a sap. Bet you started it.
And then on the opposite side of it, you know, like our game, Gone Home, doesn't have any characters in it. Our mission was to explore how to make the experience of discovering the story in that game be all about just you and an environment and interacting with it, investigating it.
Sam. Hello.
Story has always been an important part of the experience, and as games become more elaborate and we start going after more and more interesting and perhaps tougher subjects, then it's natural to start relying on story more and to start finding new ways to express story through games.
What do you need?
Recruits, liberated slaves. The warriors among them join me. The others grow the community for which we fight.
We've been through so long with people kind of going, oh, games have got cinema envy and games just want to kind of ape Hollywood and this kind of stuff. And actually it's flipping around now where, you know, what's going on in games is more interesting than what's going on in equivalent films.
I've begun my ascent on the windless slope of the western side. The setting sun was an inflamed eye squeezing shut against the light shone in by the doctors.
More different kinds of people are making games now, you know, like because of the greater accessibility of the tools and distribution, we're seeing more diversity in game developers as well, and I think that people want to tell their own stories, you know, and they're doing it through games.
I'm sort of more interested in people who aren't like me. I know me, I know my family, I know the people who look just like us. What I want to find out about is, you know, the rest of humanity. And so I think games are an excellent way to find out about other people, in part because they put you right into the story.
Pas a convincing baritone.
Assassin's Creed's a really kind of, you know, a really good example of something that a few years ago, it would be inconceivable that a game on that scale with that kind of franchise behind it would say, do you know what, actually, we want to do a game that's political and is about slavery. And it's kind of inconceivable that you would have like a AAA title having, you know, like Mass Effect, having gay characters in a way that, you know, it's amazing that Gone Home as an independent has had this enormous reach that people have loved it about a gay love story.
You've known, right? I've known. I've known since, like, She-Ra.
we're seeing more investigations into how can we tell different kinds of stories? How can we get away from established genres and still make games interesting that don't do stuff that we've played before?
As an industry, we should be proud of what we're producing. That's not unilateral. There are still problems, and there are still games which are, you know, really problematic, both in terms of what they do and the type of content they put out. But increasingly, it feels like there's a counterbalance to that, and that's a huge seismic change for the industry, and we don't celebrate it enough. We really should make more noise about it.
It's so great that games are getting recognised for their writing now.
Yeah, I think some of the best stories are told in games, but you know what games are also good for? Clicking hundreds of monsters to death in the new Diablo III expansion, Reaper of Souls.
No one can stop death.
Bajo, I've missed playing Diablo 3, and I forgot how beautiful and polished this game is. All the combat is just so reactive. Abilities are exciting, monsters satisfyingly ragdoll to their doom, and when you're playing in co-op with 3 friends, it's just chaos.
Ah, Diablo 3. It's one of those games that I just could not bring myself to uninstall, but I also haven't jumped back into it since we reviewed it way back in 2012. However, Reaper of Souls isn't just another chapter. It brings some massive changes to Diablo 3 that might just pull you back in.
Well, let's talk about the story.
For a time it seemed we would know peace.
Diablo is defeated, and while any fan of the series knows that probably won't be for long, there is a brief moment of peace in the first cutscene.
You have done well, Horadrim. Your service here is finished. And you should all run.
That is, until Malthael decides it's the perfect opportunity to take over.
Yes, and by reaping souls and causing as much death as possible, Malthael grows stronger and stronger.
Why is Malthael so intent on the city's destruction? Because he feeds on death.
It's up to you to find out his plan, fight back the hordes, and save the land. And hordes is what you'll find in bucket loads. Hex, if I had one word to describe this expansion, it would be hectics.
Oh, it's hectics to the max.
Yeah, it's fully hectics.
Hordes of enemies will hurl themselves at you without warning. They come out of the walls, they burrow out of the ground, and they will chew you up and spit you out. It's hard going being a hero.
Yeah, there's also a new class to play with, the Crusader, which has evolved a bit from the Paladin. The Crusader wears heavy armor and has some healing-focused abilities, and lots of stuns. And like all the other classes, new abilities and runes are thrown at you with nearly every level, so you're always playing with the ability sets. You can use ranged abilities for your base attacks, but it's just much more fun getting in there and meleeing with this character, I think. But do you know what my favorite ability was, Hex? The one that reigns far above the rest?
Yeah, funny enough, I do.
Prepare yourself for the stampede.
Hey Hex, what you doing there? Would you like some horse?
Enough with the horse. Get the horse out of the way. I'm trying to cross.
Why do you always find one ability in these games that you just become obsessed with just to troll me?
Who knows?
Hex, come look at this, come look at this. It's just in the corner here.
Such a noble, heavenly voice for the Crusader too, isn't it?
Yeah, although I think the male sounds a bit like bad Star Wars Ewan McGregor.
He's clever, delaying us while his power grows with each moment.
I enjoyed all the stuns with this class and the fact that you can hold so many different types of weapons, but what I like most of all is that you can put in a rune that lets you hold a two-handed weapon in one hand.
What?
I know, I've never played an RPG that's done that before.
They're breaking all the rules, Bajo. We haven't personally had time to max out all the abilities for the rest of the classes, but our favorite so far has got to be this one. That's right, the Witch Doctor's version of a Sharknado is a cyclone of piranhas, a piranado.
Gross. This expansion feels much more intense to me than Diablo 3 did.
Yeah. The levels themselves feel more alive and reactive as they crumble around you, and you'll be forced to deal with a good variety of enemy types and attacks. Plus, there's a whole bunch of timed and ambush events within the dungeons throughout the whole game, not just the expansion. I really liked these new events because they just made it so worth it to explore each map fully.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you can really put the pressure on too, because you can set your own custom difficulty. A few weeks before the expansion came out, Blizzard answered the call of fans and changed this system so you no longer have to play through on lower difficulties to unlock the harder ones. I remember our biggest complaint with Diablo 3 was that first run through, which you were forced to do on normal, and it was just so easy that it made the game a little bit less fun than it should have been.
Yeah, a lot of the old school Diablo players in our team were quite divided on that issue, I think. Now you can adjust the difficulty on the fly or start on any setting you like, except for the Torment tiers, which unlocks when you get a character to level 60.
And those tiers of Torment difficulty, Hex, the rewards for playing those are some pretty epic legendary gear that just won't drop anywhere else, and they can be so brutal. For those who only did play through once, suddenly this game will feel like it always should have been, a serious challenge, forcing you to use the abilities the way they were intended, making you switch out abilities and approach fights differently, and rewarding you properly for your hard work. Another big change is that if you hit the new level cap of 70, you can continue to earn Paragon levels, and hitting these lets you increase stats across each category by spending points. These points are shared across all the heroes tied to your account, even level 1s.
Yeah, and spending these points really allows you to tailor your character in areas where they may be deficient based on gear, which is great. Another change is that enemies now scale with your level. In theory, you could jump into any chapter at nearly any level and you'd be able to play no problem.
Yes, but unlike the old Elder Scrolls games, which used a similar system, this feels really finely tuned and balanced to me. And the game is just pure fun, isn't it?
It's so fun, and that's partly due to that Blizzard polish. You know, nothing feels half done.
And I've never appreciated the sound design until now, I think, either. Oh, the screams and howls of enemies.
And every win still shines brilliantly with glittery, rewardy, sparkly loot joy. Also, now the gear that drops will be more appropriate to you with the redesign of the loot system.
Yes, another bold restructure of the game. The theory as I know it is less loot will drop overall, but what does drop will be more suited to your class with better stats. Along with cheaper gem crafting, it's all changed to make sure you can just have a better time organising and playing with items and gear. And the legendaries, Hex, oh, they really are legendary.
They are.
They all seem to have a really interesting and unique stat assigned to them too, so it's more than just damage. Some gear leaves a trail of fire, and some randomly spawns lava. The most important thing is when a legendary does drop, it's always exciting and it always matters.
They can even drop from little bone piles on the side of the road. I mean, you want to check those bone piles.
Check everything.
You can also now enchant gear. It's very expensive on materials and gold, but for example, if you find an amazing sword that doesn't have a gem slot and you want to max it out, you can. So it's perfect for that.
You can also transmogrify your gear to make it look the way you want to, and I'm getting a little obsessed about that, Hex. One reason behind this redesign and balance of the loot system is because they've removed the auction house. It's gone. And I think that's generally considered amongst the Diablo community to be a good move.
We recently spoke to Paul Warziker, lead character artist on the game, who spoke about their decisions behind this.
We're all excited about being able to let go of the auction house. While it was a great experiment, ultimately it took you away from killing monsters as being the reward itself. We want people to get in there, and the best way to get loot should be to slay monsters. It shouldn't be to hang out in the auction house, hitting the refresh button. Removing that and getting the opportunity now to put the focus back on killing monsters was a big reason for it.
Overall, Reaper of Souls didn't feel huge in length to me, and I think, Hex, that might be an issue for some who still only want to play this through once on normal, but that's not really how you play this game anymore. This is a whole reshape, not just an expansion. And now the endgame is called Adventure Mode.
Locations marked by an exclamation point have bounties for you to undertake.
This unlocks when you finish the campaign, and it lets you go back into the map for bounties in the pursuit of leveling and gearing up to tackle the campaign's harder difficulties.
Adventure Mode also lets you unlock and open up Nephilim rifts. These are essentially randomized dungeons to plunder, but they're also different. You'll never encounter two the same, and the super randomized design means that things can get out of hand really quickly. These rifts just add so much replayability, don't they?
Yeah, they just increase the longevity of the game that much more and give you more reason to keep playing.
Strength is restored.
Overall, Bajo, with all of its thoughtful changes, this is a pretty perfect expansion. It's like they've taken the best stuff from Diablo 2 and inserted it back into Diablo 3.
Yeah, and it's exactly what the fans wanted. I think this also lays the groundwork for the future of the series, which is a good thing. What are you going to give it, Hex?
I'm going to give it 9 out of 10.
I'm going to give it 9.5 out of 10.
There we go. Oh, gross. His lungs are still breathing.
So did you name the game for this week? It was Joint Operations Typhoon Rising, released on PC back in 2004. While it did have a single-player campaign set in the not-too-distant future, most players jumped into the multiplayer mode, which had drivable vehicles. And it's our Name the Game for this week because the music was composed by Russell Brower, the same maestro behind this week's Diablo III expansion, Reaper of Souls.
Next week, after what seems like an eternity of beta testing and tweaking, we finally get to delve into the full version of Elder Scrolls Online.
And we hold our breath for a burial at sea with both episodes of Bioshock Infinite's DLC.
What happened to these children? What are they?
Where have you been? Cabin in Arcadia?
Also, just a quick note that Good Game Pocket Edition, our concise wrap-up of our week in gaming, has moved from Saturday to Sunday nights, right here on ABC2 at 8:15 p.m.
A nice way to end the weekend, Hex.
Yeah.
Until next week, Bajo out.
Hex out. You've eaten half that breadstick already. You gonna finish it? Don't actually try to finish it. No, don't, Bajo. He's still going gross.